Welcome to the For Evansville podcast. My name is John, and I'm here with Adrian, and we're really excited about our podcast today. We're still in our part of our season where we're kind of interviewing people who are for Evansville, and most of the people that we've interviewed up to this point have been people who are kind of for Evansville through their job or something else that they do, maybe on the side or as a volunteer thing.
Right.
And our guest today is a little bit different from that.
We have Dan Sullivan with us, and while he is a marketer and a preacher on the weekends, we actually brought him in here because he's just a really good neighbor. And so we are excited to just let you hear his stories. I think I wanted him on here because I just kept hearing these little tidbits of stories. And I thought people need to hear this. So we're really excited for you to hear Dan's stories today. Well, welcome, Dan. We're so excited for you to be here today.
Thank you.
Why don't you just start with talking a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how you came to Evansville?
Well, my name's Dan Sullivan. I do a lot of different things. At the GLS, it had name and organization, and I wrote various because I do get to do a lot of things around town. I work for a local law office, Woods and Woods, and that's a lot of fun because I get to be in the old jail, old Vanderburgh County jail.
Wow.
Yeah,
Cool.
the one that
location.
looks like a castle.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it's full of history and
Have you ever been in the tunnel that goes under the street?
yes.
Ooh.
Cool.
And at Halloween, when the haunted house is across the street, we hear the screams in our coffee room.
No.
man.
Yes, we
That's
do.
What
really creepy.
ambiance for Halloween.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. All I want is a cup of coffee. So I do that, and I get to preach. Like, I'm staring out the window. It's going to happen enough. I preach at a church on the west side called Westminster.
Can you see it from here?
Oh, probably theoretically,
Okay.
but not specific.
Okay.
And I live in Evansville. I've lived in Evansville my whole life.
Oh,
I
okay.
was born at St. Mary's, and I still call it St. Mary's to reveal my age and my prejudice. But I was born there so I could be close to my mom, and lived here my whole life, except for 2 years where I did relief work overseas. And then it was in that time where my wife and I said, if we are called to do ministry back in Evansville, we need to move downtown and kind of be in secret and not tell everybody that we're moving into this neighborhood. Here I'm saying it on a podcast. We're not moving. Don't tell anybody we're moving into this neighborhood to love our neighbors and to talk about Jesus, but let's do it on purpose. And so we came back to Evansville, and I walked up and down, Haney's Corner, Goosetown, Teepee Park, Baird Park, just up and down the streets, all different hours of the day, praying, God, bring your kingdom to this neighborhood. And if you want me to be a part of it, show me where to live. And some of the houses that we looked at have been torn down since then. They are now vacant lots. And because there were some pretty rundown houses, but we found a place to live. And we live in the Baird Park neighborhood. And we lived there for 13 years. And it's very fun because it's east side to the people that live on the west side. It's downtown to people that live on the east side. It is not downtown to the people that live downtown. And so we're in the middle of everything. And I live down there with my wife and I have 5 kids. One has moved out and he lives 5 blocks away from me. And he's a full-time missionary to the city with the people that he lives with. And then my oldest that lives with us goes to USI. So I've got the whole USI connection going on. And yes.
Cool.
How's that?
Very good.
What I
That's
do,
great.
how we came to Evansville. Because we had the option to leave, right? Everybody has the option to leave. And we
Right.
came back. And it seemed like very, very good that there was enough need here, enough. God loves the city, And if we wanted to go where God loved his people, that we could be in Evansville and be there.
Mhm.
Was there something about the 2 years where you were living away doing relief work that sort of brought about that kind of aha moment? Or was that something that was stewing before then or after then? Or
No, it's
how
definitely
did
an
that
aha moment.
mindset kind of come about?
Well, I had worked in professional ministry before. Now I lived in a place where it was illegal for me to be in professional ministry.
Sure.
And so everything depended on what kind of neighbor I was,
Mhm.
what kind of man I was, what kind of worker I was at my workplace. And so that reduced down. It took a lot of cultural Christianity and blew it out of the water.
Mhm.
And I had to create my own culture of what it is to be a Christian
Yeah.
in this place. And so then that just brought on that question, why aren't we doing that in Evansville?
Mm.
Why aren't we doing that back home? Why do I have to go 7,000 miles to try to just love my neighbor?
Yeah.
And the hilarious thing is, like, you know, it's not this high and mighty colonial, I'm going to go save all these people mindset. We move into a neighborhood and everybody around us goes to church and all kinds of people love the Lord, and they love their neighbors in loving us more than we have yet to love our neighbors in loving them.
Sure.
And it's just because where we moved just turned out to be perfect.
Yeah.
Such a perfect spot. We move in. So that's how it happened. That was the aha moment.
Yeah.
Was if we're not professional, if we're not compelled to do this, if I'm not actually, if I want to see the kingdom of heaven come and I want to love my neighbor as I love myself and watch the truths of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount come to life, what's the best way to do that? It's just to do it.
Yeah. Can you break that down for us a little bit on, like, what does that look like on a practical level day to day? Because I
sure.
think whenever people hear you say we came to be missionaries, they probably have a specific idea of what that looks like. And talking about ministry, like, most people have some kind of idea in their head of what that word means.
Right.
What does that mean to you? What does that look like for you guys if you're not a quote unquote professional Christian or professional minister? Then what does it look like to do that through the way that you're being a neighbor or being a worker or whatever?
A lot of it involves doing things on purpose and having an on purpose mindset of, I would really like to just play Zelda Breath of the Wild right now and just fall down that hole for the next 4 hours. But there's a party going on in the park in front of my house, and there's a bunch of cars coming, and my car is on the street, and I have this big old driveway. And if there's 3 cars in my house, 2 of them are on the street. If I can get those 2 cars off the street, that's 2 people coming to this party that would enjoy this party more because they got to park closer. So run outside, move the first car, run outside and move the second car. And there's somebody that comes up in front of my house and they are being polite and they ask from their car, can I park here? Can I park here in front of your house? It's public property. Of course you can park there. But they're being kind and they're seeing me move cars. I'm like, yeah. What's going on at the park? And I just asked that.
Yeah.
And this leads me into a half-hour discussion of what Juneteenth is, the importance of Juneteenth to this guy.
Yeah.
And he is explaining it to me, and we are just having this incredibly great conversation because I had that little inkling, you know what I mean? I think it was the Holy Spirit saying, you know what, you should really get your cars out of the street. You got this big old driveway. Make room for people that are going to be coming, be welcoming.
Yeah.
So when all the riot stuff was happening last year, and the racial tension was increasing, I told my wife, I said, I want to sit on my front porch and I would just want to shout to every African-American person that walks in front of my house, "You are safe in front of my house." And she said, "I don't know how that'll go over." And I said, "Okay, so how can I let everybody that walks in front of our house, we've got this 50 feet of space. How can we make this safe and make people feel safe while they were walking in front of our house?"
Yeah.
And that turned into me washing my car. And if I'm out front and I'm washing my car, you're interruptible. Every guy that walks by has a comment about your car, even if it's a junky old van with a garbage bag window in the back. They've got a conversation about how you wash it. And so all of a sudden, everybody that walked in front of our house was safe because here's this guy washing his car, the young kids, I'm teasing them about spraying them with the hose. But then that would make a conversation, or they'd all be like, "Will you please spray me with the hose because it's hot?" And I wouldn't. I would hand it to them and say, "Spray yourself." But it would just create this environment of, I didn't ever have to say it because I was showing it. You're safe in front of my house.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, I'm in the backyard just doing, yard work, whatever. And I look out down the driveway to the front yard, and my wife is carrying, he's probably 2 at the time, maybe 1. He's probably 1. And she's running with our 1-year-old into the park. Like, something's up. She's running with the 1-year-old.
Yeah.
And she always says, "We're going to the park." So I would know they weren't at the park. So I, come around the house, and there's a fight in the park, and there's a bunch of kids and girls, and they were fighting each other and hitting and stuff. And my wife just marched in with this 1-year-old, red-haired white lady marches into this fight, just culture clash, And she's like, "You shouldn't be doing this. This is not how you should solve your problems." And she's explaining that to them, and they're all just so freaked out. And then, a matriarch from the neighborhood, she came. And she let them all have it in her own style.
Yeah.
And they all they got the one with my wife and this lady, they got the 1-2 punch. They all dispersed. And then there's like 3 girls that were probably the most beat up or the side that lost, I guess.
Yeah.
And my wife was like, "Do you want a popsicle?" Yeah. So we have a big old covered porch. And the great thing about a porch is that you can have people into your house without them coming inside your house, because your big front porch is like your living room.
Yeah.
And so brought them up on the porch. My wife gets some popsicles, and she said, "Anytime you guys want to sit on this porch, you can sit on the porch." Just this was, 8 years ago probably. And there was another day about a year later. Those same girls were waiting for the bus, and it was pouring down raining, and we saw them, and I opened the door and I said, "Wait on our porch." And they're like, "Oh, okay." So then, the people across the street from us, they don't have any kids. They open up their porch for they're closer to the bus. Whenever it rains, all the neighborhood kids are under their bus. So, more long stories, but these very, getting involved, paying attention. Sometimes you get bored because I want to be available. My neighbor guy, he's old and he's mowing that grass. I'm watching him out my window, and I'm like, he should not be mowing grass. He's having a hard time getting around. So, I send my 12-year-old over there, send my 14-year-old over there, and say, "Hey, ask him if he'll let you mow his grass." And then he does.
Yeah.
And, does that guy know that I'm sending over my son because I'm worried about him having a heart attack in the yard? Or not necessarily. But to that guy, it's an opportunity to teach this young kid how to mow grass.
Right.
Opportunity for my young kid get $10,
Yeah.
And just watching and paying attention and then being available. We have a thing we've been doing lately. People come to our door ask for money. You know, can I have this or that? We say no. And my wife did it, I think it was yesterday. They walk away. She runs to the kitchen, makes peanut butter and jelly, makes bologna and cheese, whatever, runs back out the door, tracks them down, gives them their food.
Mm-hmm.
And that has been good because our other neighbors ask us, you know, what do we do when people come knock on our door and ask for money?
Yeah.
And we're like, don't give them any money. Just, you can if you want to, but statistically speaking, we do what the Holy Spirit tells you to do, but typically that doesn't help anything. But a sandwich is helpful, and it's always helpful. So we try to do that. We try to keep popsicles on. Don't let out my address. We'll be swamped with popsicles. We try to keep a bunch of cold drinks, cold Pepsis or cold ski or something.
Yeah.
Available. So we see the water department and these guys are out there sweating, tearing up the street, putting in gas lines. I'll go give them all a ski.
Yeah.
Just really, really trying to be attentive to that 50 feet of street that represents our house.
Right.
Whoever enters that, they're in my domain. So what can I do for them? How can I show them hospitality and bless them?
Yeah.
And then that has other effects, people, they'll come by and they'll be like, didn't we come here like 3 years ago and we tore up your street over here? And we're like, yes. And, so we have some camaraderie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
So you've mentioned a little bit about your family and how they're involved in this, but you do have quite a few kids. You say 5 kids?
Mm-hmm.
So we like to say people are for Evansville in multiple areas. And so a lot of our guests have been in the workforce there for Evansville and by the way, what they do in the work or volunteer time. But it seems like yours is your family time, your free time. Mm-hmm. So can you talk about just bringing your family along with you?
Yeah. Yes. In bringing our family along with us, the various stories or the cool spots or the cool things that we do, our kids start to refer to those. Our kids talk about the Red Bridge. What's the Red Bridge? Well, it's the bridge over Pigeon Creek. Do you remember the time we went to the Red Bridge and those guys were catching catfish? And so we try to do things that it's not exciting by any means of what is exciting, but let's go walk on the Greenway. And we walk on the Greenway. We found those weird water drum things. They're up on the north end of the Greenway, and you kind of walk by it and you don't know what it is. Mm-hmm. And then somebody on Facebook told me they're for rain. And now we've just been waiting for a rainy day to go. We're like, some Saturday when Daddy's not working, we're going to zip out there while it's raining and we're going to see what they sound like.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Just making some of the local landmarks exciting. And then we always read, just looking out the river, there's these plaques all down the riverfront that talk about history. Mm-hmm. By golly, we have read every single one of those. And we have talked about every one of them, and we've gone over all of them. I also have, my grandparents on my mom's side they all grew up in Evansville since they were, I don't know, maybe they were all born here. They were all born here. So we have all kinds of old stories about them where we can say there at that place. This is the building where my grandpa did this. Mm-hmm. And so we tell a lot of those stories and we share a bunch of those. So all 5 kids have heard those stories 100 times. Sure. And we're also, we're pretty ecumenical in that we interact with a lot of different churches. And so the church history of Evansville, we know a lot about the church history of Evansville. Mm. So we go to St. Boniface, we walk around St. Boniface. We've got some stories to tell about St. Boniface. We go down to Sacred Heart, which is the other further west side, and we talk about Sacred Heart, and we've got stories about that. But then we go out on the east side, and it's like, okay, this is where Crossroads used to be when they were little, and
Yeah.
Daddy went to their youth group when he went to Harrison, and we've got these stories. So we're telling all that, and I think just talking about how cool this city is and all the cool, getting some of the history. I mean, we homeschool, so we can be really liberal on our history and be like, today for history, we're going to go to the Wrights home, and
Sure.
which is awesome.
Yeah.
And or come down to the old jail, and Daddy will give a tour, and just to talk about the local landmarks and to really appreciate them and value them and to talk them up as their own. I mean, you don't have to fake it. It sounds like we're faking it. We're not. If you go to the museum, you go down, you look at the whole LST thing, and then you go out there, and it's like a Meade Johnson parking lot. You're like, whatever. But no, this is the same spot that we were just looking at with this model, and talk up those things. Kids think that is exciting.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stuff around, like the World War II Museum. That's a thing right here. And
Is that the one over by the airport?
Yeah, by the airport.
Mm-hmm.
And the kids can look at all that stuff and see it all and be like, that's here because this stuff was made here.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, just championing,
That's cool.
because kids think this stuff is interesting anyway.
Yeah.
And then there's amazing little details if you look for them, like on the old courthouse. There's some deal where there were all these plants that were growing in the area when they built it, and they built all those plants into the sculptures around. So
Wow.
we could walk around the courthouse for 2 hours trying to figure out what those things are.
That's cool.
And then, of course, what do? They get in the car with Grandma. They say, hey, Grandma, did you know there's a pomegranate on the, there's pawpaws on the courthouse because pawpaws used to grow down here.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
interesting. Do you feel like that has instilled like a sense of Evansville pride in your kids that isn't present in a lot of other kids? Like, are they excited about
Yeah.
Evansville? I know you said your one child who has moved out is pretty close to home in the same neighborhood. Sounds
Right.
like doing a lot of the same intentional neighboring and things
Right.
like that. So I take it that they've that's kind of been instilled in them to love their neighbors in the same way and to love their city, not just in a, wow, my city is really cool and I love it in that way, but also in a, I love the people in my city and I want them to do well and I want to give myself to.
There's
that.
a balance. Jeremiah 29:7 says, pray for the prosperity of the city that you're called to.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd probably do the same stuff, whatever city I was in.
I'm sure.
It's a whole lot easier since my grandma's grandma lived over there.
Yeah.
But to just try to benefit the city that you're in would be my hope that my kids would do.
Yeah.
And I don't want to restrain them to Evansville or anything like that.
Sure.
They're free to do
But wherever
whatever.
they end up to have a sense of ownership in their city and to want to make it prosper and do well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And to focus on what the city can do well and to enjoy that,
Mm-hmm.
and delight in that. We have this awesome river, and we have people that come from out of town. And growing up, I thought every city had a big river.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
I just thought that was a thing.
Sure.
And then I go to college in Terre Haute, and it's like, oh, there's the Wabash. That's this big city's river. And I'd walk and go look at the Wabash, and then other people would be like, the Wabash River? And they'd be so astounded. And I was like, what? You didn't grow up by a river? And they're like,
Right.
No.
Right.
And all of a sudden, it makes me really appreciate this cool, amazing thing that we have.
Yeah.
I can complain about how polluted it is, how brown it is, yada, yada, yada. You know what? That's not going to help us any.
Mm-hmm.
So to be able to embrace whatever's good, whatever's lovely about something,
Yeah.
and to really savor it, fish on it, check out the cool boats on it,
Yeah.
One of my kids canoed down Pigeon Creek last year.
Cool.
And I said, when you do this, I want you to really pay attention. This could become a thing that we could just do all the time.
Yeah.
He's like, Dad, I don't think it's a thing. It's a good thing to do. Like, you're here. I mean, like, my grandpa swam across the Ohio River.
Oh, wow.
What?
And that was a thing that young men did in the early 1900s.
Wow.
Because it was 6 feet deep.
Oh,
all
really?
the way across.
Oh.
Really?
So if you got tired of swimming, you would just quit. And then ever
when
since
was
I'm
this?
like,
The Ohio River was 6 feet deep?
yeah. I mean, it was before the 37 flood.
Okay.
So the 37 flood, these big old sheets of ice. So the Ohio River froze over for one thing.
Okay.
People were out walking across it. If
That's
you can
cool.
imagine that,
Yeah,
how cool
wow.
that would be. The sheets of ice start to break. They flow down the river and they get stuck
Mm-hmm.
and they flip up on end. And that freezes like that and builds a dam.
Mm.
And then the whole thing backs up.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so that was the 37 foot.
Wow.
I'm not a geologist. I'm a blogger, but that's
yeah.
And so before that, it was shallow that it could freeze over
Wow.
and that you could swim
I never
across
knew
it.
that. That's
And when it
amazing.
froze, you could walk out on it.
Yeah.
And so I would be just happy to swim to that little island out there. That would be
Yeah, I
enough.
Yeah,
saw them
that would be
installing
it.
that the other day.
That would
Filling
be
it
an
up.
accomplishment.
That
for
would
sure.
be.
So.
So some of our listeners or viewers have this faith background the same that you would, and some do not. And so could you talk to both sides, I guess, about what's the importance of loving your city? Why should we not just live in a place and can be consumers, but why should we cultivate that
Yeah.
kind of longing for just loving our city and seeing it prosper and do well?
Yeah. I mean, just for the practical, simple, you should love where you are, wherever you are, right? Just have a good outlook.
Mhm.
Right.
Just on that.
You'll be happier if you do.
on
Yeah.
that 1/8 inch level, right? Just be happy where you are. But on a deeper level is that wherever we are, we're making a history of things. And if we're making a history that's a positive history, that's good. If we're making a negative history, that's bad. Okay. Gosh, I just went 1/4 inch deep. You know, to be able to talk, here's one. So when they built the stadium, the Ford Center, my kids went down with their grandparents and they signed their name on the steel girder. It's something in construction that you sign your name, and they get to sign their names on this steel girder that's going to be in the roof of the Ford Center.
Cool.
Well, now my kids are 21 and 19, and I refer to that stadium as your stadium. Oh, it's right next to your stadium.
Yeah.
And they still know that they have their names written up on that. So to be interested in what the city's doing now, however many years ago, they were like 9 and 10, right? Do they have any say in whether the city should be building a stadium or not? My 9 and 10-year-old don't. But they are honoring and I don't want to say the word blessing because that's too loaded. They're esteeming the work of the city. It's not evil to build a stadium. Don't get me wrong. Don't esteem an evil thing.
There's some high debate in Evansville.
Right. But when you're 10, there isn't.
Sure.
Right.
To a 10-year-old, he's like, hockey? What is that?
Yeah.
Sure.
And so they get to esteem and do this stuff. And they are becoming a part of the history of Evansville by doing that. They are participating in the stuff that's happening, the betterment. You know, when the post house was getting built, I used to work right across from the post house. And I would take them out and show them the progress of the post house all the time because I said, you guys, when you're old, this is going to be an old building. this is going to be so not exciting because it will just be a part of the landscape.
Yeah.
You will be so used to this. And right now we're like, whoa, look at that, this, that. It'll be old news. But it's cool. So seeking the benefit of the city, anybody can spend their time complaining and putting stuff down and putting down work that's happening in the city. If you don't have any direct influence on it happening or not, why not esteem it?
Mm-hmm.
Because, did I love the farmer's market that used to be there? Yes, I did. Did I think it was cool that helicopters would land there during the Freedom Festival in that big open? Yes, that was really cool. But now the post house is there. And am I ever going to live in the post house? Probably not. But let's get excited about it. It's going to benefit a whole bunch of people. Mm. It is already benefiting. So, just seeking the benefit of those around you, even just in my little neighborhood of, looking after my neighbor and keeping an eye on, the whole work from home thing. This wonderful thing happened. The street cleaner came. And in our neighborhood, the street cleaner is real, they hang the sign up, don't park. Everybody has to park on the street because we don't have very good driveways and we don't have garages. And so one person down the street heard the street cleaner. So she ran out and she moved her car off the street and she hit her horn. Well, everybody's working from home. Sure. Or everybody's home not working. And they hear that ruckus and they look out the window and they hear her honking her horn. And you could tell, it clicked with everybody. Street cleaners coming, move your car. And we had this whole, Tuesday at 10 party out in the street. Everybody moving their cars, scrambling and waving to the street cleaner and watching the street cleaner go by. And then we all moved our cars back into these off the other side of the street so he could come down the other side of the street. What was that lady doing? That lady was seeking the benefit of the city where she lives.
Yeah.
I'm going to alert the whole street down. Mm-hmm. The street cleaner's coming, you guys. You all want your street cleaned in front of you.
Right.
Really, really simple, fun stuff like that. That can happen on a really tiny. On our park, it happens. There'll be various big gatherings, family reunions and stuff like that. And the people always come. If I'm out, they'll ask stuff. Do you mind if we play this music really loud? Do you mind if we? And again, it's public property. But just they're considering us to ask that is awesome. And then that gets us in a conversation, caring about each other, talking about whatever their family reunion is or whatever.
Yeah. It seems like your neighborhood has a really cool community, and that probably is from intentional living like you guys have done. How can people get started? A lot of people don't live on streets with parks across the street from them or, public spaces. So do you have any advice for people who want to cultivate this kind of neighborly affection?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Do it on purpose. It's not going to happen on accident. I think about Halloween, trick or treat time. There's all kinds of people coming by your door. It's the one holiday that your neighbors are encouraged to come and talk to you
right
at your front door. Like, this is the best holiday ever, right? What? Yes, Halloween. So a couple years ago, we rolled the grill out in the front yard and we started grilling hot dogs at 3:00 in the afternoon and serving hot dogs. And the neighbor lady across the street, are you giving out hot dogs for Halloween? We said, yeah, why not? She's like, okay. So she went and got a case, and it was still early in the day.
Yeah.
She went in and got a case of Gatorade. It was Gatorade or Double Cola. Not name brand. And she was giving out Cokes. So then the guy next door to us, he saw that going on. And he's like, I'm doing chips. And I guess he had a couple of these variety boxes of, for his kids' lunches or whatever. And so all of a sudden, our little 3-house interchange, you go get candy wherever, but you come here, you get dinner.
Like, forget candy.
Right?
We're serving dinner for Halloween.
And the parents were,
That's awesome.
Halloween, people stand back and they let their kids go do their thing. And I'm like, Dad, you want a hot dog? Yeah. So I would say, look, that's pretty elaborate. Look for stuff to do that you can. I have a friend in Indy, and he regularly takes a rocking chair, goes out to the end of his driveway. He does it in the early morning and late in the day when he knows people are going to be jogging or walking or exercising. He sits at the end of his driveway in his rocking chair, and that's all he does. And people walk by and they'll talk to him. And maybe the third day of jogging by, they stop and talk. And it's because that front porch at the end of his driveway says, interrupt me, talk to me, versus sitting in his backyard on his awesome patio. His patio is awesome. But instead, he's just that little. My wife has the broom of power. We keep this broom on the front porch, and if there's something going on outside and we're not really sure what it is, she will go out and she'll start sweeping the sidewalk. And it doesn't take long that if it's something negative, if there's fighting going on, people do not want to fight when there's this sweet little lady sweeping up all of this dust into the air. And she knows how to do it. She will, if she wants to run them off, she will sweep the dust.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is just not fun. This lady's staring at us.
Dirt storm up and running.
There's all this dust all over my car's getting dirty. Or if she thinks that they need help, she is not as aggressive, but she's still looking. And she's interruptible, right?
Right.
And what's she doing? She's sweeping her sidewalk. And so she does that, regularly. We just try to really leverage our front yard. We will, we take the inflatable kayaks out. They're all soaking wet. I could easily roll those out in my backyard and hose them off and clean it all up. But if I do it in my front yard, I'm sending this big sign to everybody that walks by. I'm available. I'm available. So I say that if you don't live on a park, you have a front porch.
Yeah.
You have a front yard anyway, theoretically, to be available in that space.
Cool.
And then, gosh, I can't tell you how many great conversations I've had giving out the cold Coke or the popsicle or the bottle of water. You see on Instagram stuff, people leave the box for the UPS drivers and all that stuff. But if you just sit for a little bit and watch, there are people outside doing stuff, checking the water meters, various workers around town, people that are just walking by, that you can get them with that too, and that opens up a lot of conversation.
Yeah,
cool.
That's great.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So a lot of those types of things, those small interactions, might seem kind of insignificant because it's just a small moment. It's just a Coke. It's just a small conversation as somebody's walking by. What do you hope will be the impact of your family living in the house where you guys live? What do you hope is the history that you've left behind? Like how do you hope that neighborhood or the people that you've interacted with, that their lives are different because you guys lived there instead of somewhere else?
So when we moved into our neighborhood, I went to neighborhood association meeting. Didn't know anything about the neighborhood. And I said, my house is abandoned. It's been abandoned for 18 months. I've got a tool where you have to remodel it. We have to do some work on it. How do I keep my house safe? And this lady, she said, where you moved in next to so-and-so? And I said, yeah. And everybody shook their heads. And I said, if you live next to them, you live in the safest house in the neighborhood. Because is Inez Vick. We moved in next to this lady named Inez Vick. and she was famous in our neighborhood. What did she do? Now I'm going to expose everything. She swept in front of her house every day.
Mm-hmm.
She was always out sweeping the street in front of her house. So everybody on the street knew her. And she was always watching everything. And so if the Sullivans can take the mantle of the Vicks and continue that, that would be pretty awesome.
Was there an official ceremony where she passed the broom of power onto you, or was there a knighting? Or was that more of an
unfortunately
informal
not.
thing? Okay.
Nope. And she's passed away now. So my wife, she pulled the broom out of the stone and continued.
Okay.
But, you know, we'll have people that'll drive by and they'll say, they're men. If a man walks by my house that's an African-American man around 50,
Mm-hmm.
and he's got a look in his face, I know what I'm going to hear from him.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say, how are you today? He says, oh, man, your house used to be the best house for playing hide and seek. Because apparently whatever family lived there in the early 80s or the late 80s, our house was the hub for all the neighborhood kids to come play hide and seek in their house.
That's cool.
And it's like, gosh, we got the Vicks next door, where the lady says, if you moved in next door to Inez Vic, you got the safest house in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
If these guys they'll drive by in their cars, they'll drive by real slow, and I'll kind of wave. I'm like, I bet you played hide and seek in my house. And sure enough, they'll talk about it. It's like, gosh, there are already a ton of good memories.
Yeah.
And a ton of good impact that has happened in this block here,
Right.
in these houses right here. Let's just continue that.
Sure.
You know, that we had a boy we were playing at the park with one time, and he just said out of nowhere, he's like, can I come to your house for dinner? And I looked at my boys, and they were all like, you just said that. Sure. You know, he came to our house for dinner maybe once a week for a month or two.
Wow.
And then he just disappeared.
Mm.
And gosh, you know, if that guy, when he's 47, is walking by and sees whoever's living there and be like, there was this family that I just came over to their house for dinner once a week. They didn't even know my last name.
Yeah.
That would be really cool.
Yeah.
You know, the things where somebody walks by and they're like, do you guys have a church here? Do you have a church in your house? I'm like, what? No? Why would you think that? And, I just heard there's a church in a house over here. And there's no church in a house anywhere near. You know, I know it's got to be something they heard from our house. Our missionary friends going door to door, and they knocked on our neighbor across the alley. And they were like, we're Christians, and we're just trying to encourage Christians. And he said, oh, go across my alley. Go to them. They're Christians. They'll talk to you. And even though we already knew those missionaries, and it would have been great if he would have talked to them too, just that they know this is a safe, you know, bring it full circle, back to the beginning. This is a safe spot.
Yeah.
There's Christians here, and they're welcoming. We're welcoming to everybody.
Yeah.
Gosh, not just Christians, but we're a welcoming place, and it's being established here that this is a welcoming place.
Yeah.
It's safe. We didn't have, when we moved in, we didn't have a fence in our backyard. And remember, our house was abandoned for 18 months when we moved in.
Sure.
So we saw these kids cutting through our yard all the time. One day we pulled up in our van, we pull up in our front yard, and there's this whole mess of kids walking down the street, and they turn right into our front yard while we're standing there. And this kid goes, do you mind if we use the shortcut? It was like, our house is called the shortcut. Go ahead, go for it.
That's funny.
And this, 8, 12 kids all just cut right through our yard. And it was like, okay, that's awesome and terrible. Can't stay that way. But let's let them do it until we get a fence.
Yeah.
And let the fence be the bad guy, not
Right.
us. So just that
Yeah.
being welcoming and making it a space that is welcoming.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, thanks for taking the time to talk with us today. It was great to hear some of your story and the story of your neighborhood, really.
Yeah.
And I hope that our listeners are encouraged by that, to be good neighbors, and to think about the history that they're writing and creating in their little piece of Evansville, wherever that might
and
be.
changing. I mean, some of the neighborhood stories have to change, and that's okay too.
That's right. Yeah.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that was really cool. I've had a chance to talk to Dan here and there before, but never like sit down and like interview him and hear deeply about his story and just kind of his thoughts about Evansville and stuff. But I'm having just talked to him, I'm feeling inspired, and I'm kind of thinking about creative ideas of what can I do in my neighborhood or in my front yard even.
Right.
Because the things that he talked about were not hard to do.
Yeah.
They were creative, but they were also really simple, and they kind of came from just paying attention to what was going on around him, really.
Right. That's what I was going to take away from this, is just his idea of paying attention. And that's something we've kind of been exploring, just paying attention to our city and paying attention to where we work, what's going on in our workplaces. But also he just brought that closer to home, literally, of paying attention to what's going on in your neighborhood and just being available. And it, like you said, it was easy stuff. It wasn't hard. And a lot of the times those conversations and really helpful things came out of him just sitting there or like just being in his front yard.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like, you kind of mentioned as we were talking to him, some of our guests have had a story where their faith perspective has a lot to do with why they do what they do in the city, and he's that way, but in kind of a different way, sort of taking literally that idea of like, do unto others as you would want them to do unto you. Like if I'm out working on the street on a hot day, I would love for somebody to bring me something cold to drink,
Right? Yeah.
And so taking that literally and just doing little things like that to be hospitable, to make our city a place where you feel like the people around you, even if you don't know them very well, you feel like the people around you are kind of looking out for you in a sense, and like you're not on your own,
Right.
And I kind of got that sense from the other stories that he was talking about in that neighborhood of like, oh, you live next to that person, you don't have anything to worry about,
Right?
Because she's out there and she's looking out for you,
Right.
She's looking out for the neighborhood and stuff.
And that's important whether you are faith-based or not, just to have that feeling of security, but camaraderie. And another huge part of what he was talking about was just pride in where you live. And I loved that idea of bringing his kids along through storytelling.
Yeah.
I feel like there's maybe a lost art there that he's kind of tapping back into, of just kind of this idea of like sitting on your front porch and sharing stories. Like I would love to know if kids played hide and seek in my house, you know, like that would make me love my house even more. But even just bringing your kids along, like reading those plaques on the riverfront. Have you ever read those? Because now I'm feeling convicted that I haven't, or just as I raise my own kids, just what stories can I share about growing up here that maybe builds that sense of pride and ownership. So maybe he doesn't want to leave.
Right. Well, and I love that along with that sense of storytelling, it was recognizing that we're playing a role in a story that's bigger than our own story. It wasn't just the story of the Sullivan family and and what they're doing in the neighborhood and what they're doing in the city. It was like, this is the story of our city. How can we sort of write a good chapter in that story? How can we make that positive and make it a part of Evansville's story that people feel good about, and that it is a part of the story that you'd be happy about whenever you read it.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really cool.
That's really cool. Right. I feel like we could talk a lot more about just ideas and unpacking things that I would love to hear from you guys. We would love to hear from you about maybe if you have stories like Dan, I would love to hear those, just of the unique ways that maybe you are impacting your neighborhood, or maybe your neighbors have impacted you. Just people who are for Evansville. We want to hear those stories. So please share those with us. You can email us at info@forevansville.org. Or you can follow us on social media and connect with us there at For Evansville.
Thanks for listening.